Hello, everyone. My name is Levi Browde. I'm the Executive Director of the Falun Dafa Information Center. We're a human rights organization, all-volunteer organization dedicated to the human rights of Falun Gong practitioners in China, and we're reporting on that for 25 years. And more recently, really being focused on transnational repression. And as you heard today from what these people were talking about, a core component of the transnational repression of the Chinese regime against Falun Gong increasingly has become to sabotage, to cancel, to destroy Shen Yun, the company. I'd like to underscore a couple things on the broader issue here, because what's really at play goes way beyond the Falun Gong diaspora, the community. It goes way beyond this one company, Shen Yun. This is a national security issue of, I would say, the gravest kind. I want to share a couple quotes for you here. One is from U.S. Attorney Damian Williams. He said this from the Southern District of New York shortly after arresting the two gentlemen that Leisha had referenced that had tried to bribe their IRS to go after Shen Yun. And he said, efforts to manipulate and use the arms of the U.S. government to carry out the PRC government's autocratic aims are as shocking as they are insidious. Another quote. This is from U.S. Brigadier General Robert Spalding, testifying before our Congress last year, where he said the CCP uses our own media against us. And one good example of this is the attack on Falun Gong. And he goes on to talk about how they've basically convinced our media, our university institutions, that Falun Gong is weird or strange or the somehow strange group. And they're controlling the narratives here in the United States. Leisha talked about the campaign the CCP has engaged against Shen Yun has been going on for 18 years. We did a report on this and documented at that time 130 incidents across 38 countries where primarily Chinese diplomats, sometimes the ambassador, him or herself, in the country going to threaten the theater, threaten the local government. In the Dominican Republic, they even chased down the president of the country, trying to put pressure on these countries to not have Shen Yun perform. The range of tactics has gone from threatening theaters and government officials to disinformation, sabotaging vehicles, imprisoning family members and threatening family members that are inside China. So this has been going on for 18 years. And as Leisha mentioned, over the last year, there's been a tremendous escalation. Where has that come from? The very highest levels of the Chinese regime. We have multiple sources, including a well-known professor in Australia, several other sources within the Ministry of Public Security that say this came from Xi Jinping himself, who acknowledged that all the efforts they've been undertaking over the last 25 years to silence Falun Gong and Shen Yun have failed. And they needed to get very serious about eliminating Falun Gong globally. Their words, not mine. And so that's what we've been seeing. And they laid out a strategy. They said, we're going to establish a beachhead in social media, YouTube influencers, things of that nature, with narratives that will work in the United States, with things that make people angry, such as abuse of young people. This is not something they ever talk about with Falun Gong or Shen Yun inside China, but they find the narratives in this country, seed that information in influencers, and then try and bait the mainstream media, and in so doing, drive a wedge between Shen Yun and Falun Gong and the U.S. government and American people. So this is what they've been saying in these meetings with the Ministry of Public Security. Lo and behold, over the last year and a half, that's exactly what we've seen. And that's what's behind everything that they've been talking about today in this campaign to go after Shen Yun. So, as I mentioned, this is really not just about the Falun Gong community or Shen Yun. This is a playbook. This is the ability for the Chinese regime to weaponize American institutions against America. And if they succeed at doing this against Shen Yun, against the Falun Gong community, it will not stop there. The persecution of Falun Gong never stops at Falun Gong. They were doing forced organ harvesting on Falun Gong for many years, and suddenly they started doing it on Uyghurs and other groups. John Chen, the man that was arrested for bribing the IRS, guess what else he was doing? He was coordinating other spies in California to interfere with our elections. If they succeed in implementing this playbook to try and sabotage or cancel Shen Yun, this is a playbook they can repeat against any person or organization in America or around the world. And so, while these stories are very close to us inside this Falun Gong community and the Shen Yun community, They are a national security issue, and this is what we need to start talking about, is this not just victimization of a group of people. This is a weaponization of our institutions against ourselves, and that's what we need Congress to step up with, our government agencies to step up with. And as Kay had mentioned, while protecting the civil liberties, while protecting our freedoms in this country, find a way to protect Americans and American companies from Beijing. That's really what this story is about. Thank you.
This question may be directed to Levi or Lishai. When it comes to the weaponization of our institutions, there seems to be a lot of moving pieces, and it seems very complicated. If you could sort of elaborate on this, and also the calls that we heard from the petition, announcing the petition, the calls for the Department of Justice to look into it, what would they be looking for exactly?
And again, I recognize this is a challenge because my father was a professor of constitutional law. There was a lot of discussion about the framers around our dinner table growing up. This is a great country for the freedoms it has, the civil liberties, and whatever solution we come up with needs to maintain that. We're not giving that up. However, we have a threat that the framers could never even conceived of in a million years, and I think we need to look at the implements for strengthening that. And the first place to start, perhaps, aside from what the petition is calling for, to have these institutions, Congress, Department of Homeland Security, DOJ looking at this, look at the weapons that we have right now, for example, the FARA regulations. Now, are those strong enough? Those were formulated many years ago. Are they strong enough so that we can identify someone who's truly working as a foreign agent and somehow operating a foreign malign influence operation here? Not nearly strong enough. And now we have so many examples of Chinese spies and espionage and everything that these guys have been talking about to recognize that's not strong enough. So we need legal mechanisms that at first at least requires transparency, so we know when an individual organization truly is working on behalf of Beijing, and then going the next step to be able to strengthen our ability legislatively in terms of the executive branch to take action on that. It's very weak, and it's decades behind the threat that Beijing actually poses.